Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, my fine friends. Welcome to the second episode of Season 12 of the Tom Petty Project podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Brown. This is the weekly podcast that digs into the entire Tom Petty catalogue, song by song, album by album, and includes conversations with musicians, fans, and people connected with Tom along the way. Okay, well, social media was pretty quiet this last week, but Jack McNay did leave the following comment about Room at the Top. Camaraderie in seclusion, a joining together of broken souls and enduring appreciation for simplicity, all wrapped up in a package of despairing loneliness and anguish. Forlornness at its most universal. That's what this one's all about, and it lands as much now as it did a decade ago. Well, thanks as always for listening, Jack, and as always for chatting on Facebook. And I always think forlornness, I always think that can't be an actual word, surely. It's just got that weird ring that, like sometimes when you look at words and you think, actually a word? Just looks weird. Anyway, but I'm getting off topic here. Nora Hayward Olsen echoed, pun intended, a sentiment that you hear lots from people who know the album's opening track, saying, "The line, 'Please love me, I'm not that bad, and I love you so,' just breaks my heart. I can think of so many situations it could be applicable to." And again, we talk about that universality in Tom's lyrics and how he was able to connect with us on a human level all the time. Over on Blue Sky, Steve Ursel left the following lovely message. "I think this was one of your best episodes yet. Absolutely absorbing on both the music and lyrical content, and it made me appreciate the nuances of the song that much more. Maybe pushing your luck with the bat joke, though. I have to agree, it's a brilliant song that packs a real emotional punch." Well, first of all, thanks a ton for that, Steve. This one was, Room at the Top, though, was an easy one to do, really. The song does most of the heavy lifting for anyone analysing it because there is a lot to talk about. And I'll try to up my joke game for you. Maybe I can get the Cardinal to write a few gags for me. To finish up your feedback over on Instagram, Lisa Kelly Pennington is off to a winning start in guessing my ratings this season and commented 1-0. If you had said anything else, I would have messaged you to see if you were okay. This is, of course, one of my absolute favourites, and yes, beautiful and devastating. I'd also posted on Facebook this past week that I finished up Mike's autobiography, Heartbreaker. And for anyone who hasn't read it yet, I know that you'll love it. It does a fantastic job of giving us a story that we know quite a few parts of, but from a completely different point of view. Mike doesn't linger on the conflicts or darker moments, though he does touch on them at key points. I think because this, as the title suggests, is a memoir of his life as a musician, and specifically within the context of the Heartbreakers. And my pal Dallas Elliker left the following comment on my post as I was talking about, selfishly wishing that it had been longer and certainly gone into more detail about the last 3 or 4 albums. And Dallas replied, "I completely agree. My only complaint was I would have loved to hear more about the last 3 to 4 albums. As I was nearing the end, I lamented the number of pages running low. This is a story about a guy from the humblest of beginnings. He grew up with nothing. You could say he had talent, but I think his real talent was his obsessive commitment to playing and practicing. He became a great guitar player through his sheer determination. Same with his songwriting. He's good because he wrote 1,000 songs, probably sitting on tapes on a shelf somewhere. And talk about humble. He had to be diplomatic, to sacrifice his own ego for the sake of the big picture. He had to take some hits that I don't think many would have stood for, but the fact that he did allowed him to be in a great band for 40 years and make tons of amazing music. There are certainly some lessons in this book if one cares to notice them." And I was thinking about this, Dallas, and I figured I'd respond on the pod rather than in the comments because you touched on something I definitely also agree with and believe in, is that it's okay to be a cog in the machine. It's okay to be in the background. It's okay to be a team player. We're sold over and over that to excel and to make it, you have to be the one with your name constantly in lights and constantly being talked about. But I think that Mike shows us that attribute, that humility, is something that's okay to aspire to. I always teach the soccer players I coach that it isn't always about scoring the goal, laying on the assist, or making the big save. It's all the little things you do for 90 minutes, week in, week out, that accumulate into making you a better player or a great player. And in soccer, there's only one ball and 22 players on the field. Only one player can have the ball at any one time. So what you do off the ball is a critical part of the game and one that makes the difference to the team winning or losing. So Mike was always doing the work off the ball. Sure, he scored a bunch of important goals too, but his tireless running, ability to just dig in and work when required, and to keep his focus and attention on what was creatively important speaks volumes about his integrity and work ethic. And I think both of those are features of artists who have long, rich careers. And regardless of Tom being hard on him at times, you can also tell that he thought the world of him and loved him dearly. And as a reminder on the book, I'm going to be appearing on Eric Senich's brilliant podcast, Booked on Rock, to chat about it, chat about Heartbreaker, and I'll make sure that you have a link for that one once it's out, which I'm sure will be in the next sort of 2-3 weeks or whatever. Okay, well, I think that's it for social media this week. As always, there's a link in the episode notes if you want to listen to the song before we dig in, as I don't play the song in the episode itself to avoid all those frustrating copyright type issues. So let's talk about Counting on You. In Conversations with Tom Petty, the only thing Tom tells author Paul Zollo about this song is that should have been a single. I don't know why they didn't put that out as a single, which highlights the fact that even artists as big as Tom and the Heartbreakers only have so much control over the business side of their catalogue. This was the main reason that Prince fought back against the labels, changed his name to an unpronounceable symbol, and for the rest of his life wouldn't collaborate with anyone who didn't have complete control over their creative rights and their output. As for Counting on You, it's another one of those that Tom expressed a real fondness for, but never found its way into a set list. And, this is forgivable at this stage in his career because by this point he's pulling from 11 albums plus usually, a couple or three covers. So it's harder to work in too many, the deeper cuts and these sort of, album tracks. We start to see those less and less as we go on. And I was looking at setlist.fm and it seems that the band only performed 4 songs from the album on the Echo tour. Now, of course, we do know a lot of the reasons why that is. And I'd have to go back to check, but I'd be willing to bet that this is the smallest number of songs for any one album for any tour in support of it, which again points back to Tom's personal struggles at this time, which we'll end up talking a little bit more about later on in the podcast. Counting on You opens with a wonderful little trill on the hi-hat from Steve Ferroni that he opens the choke on as the whole band kicks in. And I've long thought that this is one of the real precursor songs to Mojo. There's a bite to that kick, snare, and bass guitar that is also perfect on the later album, and obviously the sound is quite different as Mike isn't playing his Les Paul on this record, and obviously it's not Ron Blair on bass, but the overall effect is such that if you threw this onto a playlist with the other tracks from Mojo, it would fit seamlessly. We now have 3 guitar parts rather than the 2 that we usually have, with Mike's lead panned slightly left, Tom's rhythm part panned through the middle and mixed back a touch, and then Scott Thurston adding a second lead part in the right channel. That's the configuration I'm guessing is the case anyway. You then have some acoustic piano playing low down on the bass notes with a fantastic breakdown-esque flourish on the Wurlitzer electric piano from Benmont to bring us to the first verse and Tom's vocal. Like Room at the Top, it's a short 4-bar intro. When the first verse kicks in, the guitars back off a little bit, allowing that Howie and Steve rhythm section to propel the song forward. And again, I'm guessing that's Howie. It's a pretty simple bass line. It could be Mike, I suppose, because Mike is credited with playing bass on this record, and Howie's participation was a little bit erratic given his addiction issues. But let's go with Howie because we don't know any difference at this point. And again, those 3 guitars are all mixed back and playing very reserved parts. We have an acoustic guitar strumming down the middle again with that trebly tone. So I suspect it's Tom not playing the top E string of the guitar at all, as it's A minor, and it's most likely just the open second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth strings, because you typically get that sort of higher register when you play that way. Then you have Mike very identifiably in the left channel, and I assume, again, Scott Thurston adding that second lead in the right. And both are simply playing arpeggiated or opened at times strummed chords. So all very simple, all very reserved, all very tasteful, as we would come to expect from the Heartbreakers. Now, song structure-wise, this is again an interesting one because in reality, the verse is only 2 lines. I want you to be my little lover. I want you to be my power glide. Before we get into what I'd say is a pre-chorus of, oh, 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 little girl, don't misunderstand me, and then the chorus. So let's talk about the lyrics on this song quickly, or specifically the verses, as there's a backstory that some people might not be aware of that I think is relevant in this case. That line, I want you to be my little lover, I want you to be my power glide, seems incoherent in the sense that I want you to be my power glide isn't a common expression, and I'm assuming it's referring to like a recliner, so something that gives comfort, but that's not a common expression, and in the hands of a lesser artist, could be dismissed as a throwaway placeholder line that never got replaced. But during the recording of and subsequent tour for Echo, as I said, I think on the kickoff episode, Howie Epstein's heroin addiction was escalating to worrying heights, but closer to home, Tom was also struggling with the drug. Tom had started using sometime between the end of She's the One, or maybe after the Fillmore gigs, the Fillmore residency. I couldn't find a really, really good timeline for this, but he had started using when he was living alone in the Chicken Shack. And there were days, as reported in Warren Zanes' biography and confirmed in Mike Campbell's book, that Tom was in really rough shape during the making of Echo. He was walking with a cane some days and not being just as creative as he ordinarily was. At this stage, co-producer Rick Rubin thought he'd try to give Tom a creative spark. And author Warren Zanes writes in Petty, there were efforts to change the mood. Rubin went to Barnes & Noble and purchased several magnetic poetry sets, boxes of words intended for building phrases on refrigerators. And Rubin explains, I went through them all and took out all the little words, the, to, and, for, and then put the rest of them on a music stand. Then when Tom had songs without words, he'd randomly look at words and make up sentences. It was remarkable and beautiful, and he could draw on this pool of information to create stories. His mind works very fast. So I wonder if the verses for this track were some sort of amalgamation of this approach and maybe Tom having the chorus already in place with no verses. If you look at all three verses, they're thematically disconnected and they do feel somewhat arbitrary, so I think it maybe it lines up. I want you to be my little lover, I want you to be my power glide, is followed by I want you to drive my Eldorado, I want you to fly my aeroplane, and finally, well, I saw your reflection in the river and I swear I heard you in the wind. So you could see power, glide, aeroplane, river, wind, all being words, from these poetry sets that were sort of magnetically placed on Tom's music stand, and he could draw those lines, or draw from those lines, I should say, without them being necessarily narratively consistent or specific. And Tom also does that from time to time, having a partial narrative and a more esoteric part in the same song. Crawling Back to You would be another example that we covered a few months ago. Anyway, no matter Tom's headspace and focus at the time, one thing you never get is a drop-off in his vocal performance. We get a couple of trademark bent petty vowels in don't and misunderstand in this pre-chorus section before the arrangement in this chorus section changes. We now have Mike Campbell playing those short staccato guitar stabs in the left channel with a high organ part through the middle, all on top of that acoustic guitar that is still there but again mixed down low. There's also a harmony vocal part here that does sound to me like it's Howie Epstein. And we have that wonderful key change on If It's True, going to the D before moving back to the root A minor. Now, in the turnaround from this chorus to the next verse, we also hear something that I can't recall hearing, well, as overtly at least, on a Heartbreaker song before. Mike and Benmont double that lick. Benmont on acoustic piano and Mike on guitar. It's a very simple little phrase, which is followed then by some more bluesy guitar and the Wurlitzer piano from Benmont, and we're into verse 2. In this second verse, the piano moves up an octave to be sitting around middle C, and we have the introduction of a fantastic keyboard part mixed over in the left channel. I think, and I may be wrong here, but my sense is that this is the Chamberlin that Benmont is credited with playing in the liner notes. It has an unusual sort of characteristic tremolo and timbre that it doesn't sound like a regular organ to me. So the Chamberlin was a precursor to the Mellotron, and I love the fact that we see these archaic or unusual keyboard instruments, or instruments in general, showing up from time to time on Heartbreakers records, especially since Wildflowers and then moving forward. You could absolutely have an organ playing there, and it would have sounded good, but that specific tone really adds an uneasy air to the piece in this section. Mike's guitar is also still mixed into that left channel, but now it's dropped back a little in the mix. So there are interesting developments happening musically in this one that you can miss if you're just enjoying sitting in the 106 BPM groove. I certainly missed a few of these things when I was listening the first time, and again, it's another one of those songs that has revealed itself the more time I've spent with it. The second chorus follows the sonic shape of the first with no significant change in instrumentation or vocal delivery, and this chorus repeats the last line before Mike and Benmont trade solos on guitar and Wurlitzer. All the while, the organ keeps time percussively in the background of the guitar sections, and during the piano parts, we have those laid guitars providing the colour. Alrighty, folks, it's time for some petty trivia. Your question from last week was this. Echo, I don't know why I said it like that. Echo reached number 10 on the Billboard chart, but which was the last Heartbreakers record to also hit the top 10? Was it A, Songs and Music from She's the One? B, Into the Great Wide Open? C, Let Me Up, I've Had Enough? Or D, Southern Accents? Well, some of you would have noticed the little cheat I applied here. I didn't include the two solo albums, Full Moon Fever and Wildflowers, both of which did hit the top 10 in the US. Songs and Music from She's the One is the second lowest charting post-Torpedoes release from the Heartbreakers, clocking in at number 15, and Let Me Up, I've Had Enough was the lowest at number 20. Into the Great Wide Open saw a big MTV video hit and a top 30 single, but despite this, it only charted at number 13 on the Billboard chart. And on a previous trivia question, I'd noted that despite this, it was the Heartbreakers and Tom's overall highest charting album in the UK, registering at number 3 on the British chart. So that means your answer is Southern Accents, which was the 4th consecutive top 10 album for the Heartbreakers at that point, charting 2 places higher than its predecessor Long After Dark and reaching number 7 on the Billboard and being certified platinum by the RIAA on September 20th, 1985. Your question for this week is this. Which song from Echo was the first single released from the album? Was it A, Room at the Top, B, Free Girl Now, C, Swingin', or D, This One's For Me? Okay, back to the song. The third verse sees some background ooze added and Mike adding in more prominent fills underneath the vocal lines. There's a wonderful little lick underneath And I Swear, with Mike playing double stops, sliding up and then back down a step. This is augmented by Benmont trilling on the Wurlitzer. We then get more fills from Benmont in this next chorus as he and Mike trade off to really good effect, complementing the melody lines. We even have that Chamberlain coming back in before the outro gives away to Mike Campbell playing some sultry lead underneath Tom, vamping the pre-chorus and chorus vocal lines. There's also a false ending from Steve Ferroni before we get some fantastic guitar and organ noodling before a final big crash. So as I said, sonically, you could definitely hear this one sitting happily on Mojo, but I also sometimes feel that this is the most Wildflowers-sounding of all the songs on Echo. If you found out that it was another of the songs that hadn't been included on that album, it wouldn't really surprise you. You have the layered guitars and lots of different keyboard parts being added and the simple harmony vocals through the chorus. They all blend to make Counting on You one of Tom's timeless grooves. And again, during this period, he had a million of these. And if I am right about how the verse lyrics were constructed for this one, and given the shape Tom was in when he was having to rely on fridge magnets to start his creative lyrical motor, it's a brilliantly evocative piece of writing that they ended up with. I always feel like I'm on a country lane late at night in autumn when I hear this song. It doesn't sound like California to me, even though it mentions El Dorado. It feels more like the English countryside. I don't know why that is, but that's what I always kind of get from it. It has a suffocating, claustrophobic tension to it that never really lets up. We don't get a big resolution to a major key, and the D major that we do get just creates more suspense because it's also a key change when it comes in. All very moody, very atmospheric, and very dark. Okay, Pettyheads, that's it for this week. There's a rumour going round, somebody's going to let me down, and I don't know what it's all about, or if it's true, I'm counting on you. There's a tacit suspicion bordering on accusation in that line that I find really ominous and really heavy. If you wanted to, you could almost make it a biblical reference with Peter denying Jesus, and I very highly doubt that it's allegorical in that way, but it has that sort of brooding undercurrent of deceit and treachery to it that elevates it as a mood piece for me. Counting on You isn't a song I'd ever give to a non-Pettyhead to try and bring them over to our side. I think it's more challenging than most of Tom's more accessible work, but as the second track on Echo, it very firmly fastens down the overall tone of the album before we're picked up and shaken around in track 3. So I've always liked this song, and I really like it as the second track, and it's definitely enhanced by some very enchanting complementary playing between Mike and Benmont and likely Scott Thurston. So, man, this is a tough one because, I've got to stick with I was going to change it then on the fly, but I've got to stick with my original rating. This is a rock solid 7 out of 10. The Tom Petty Project is a proud member of the Deep Dive Podcast Network. Go check us out at deepdivepodcastnetwork.com. You can also check out my other podcast, Seaside Pod Review, a Queen podcast that I do with my very best friend, Randy Woods. And you can also check out the Ultimate Catalog Clash that I co-host with my other great pal, Corey Morissette. Don't forget to follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and YouTube at The Tom Petty Project, and on Blue Sky at Tom Petty Project. Go follow, like, do all the subscribing, all that kind of stuff, and the ratings and the reviewing and all those kinds of things. Just go do those if you haven't done them. They do make a bit of a difference every now and again. Keep talking to me on social media, and I'll keep reading out as many of your comments as I can shoe in, and depends when I'm writing the episode. I might miss some every now and again. As your weekly reminder, the Tom Petty Project is not affiliated with the Tom Petty Estate in any way, and when you're looking for Tom's music, please visit official streaming platforms and/or go to your local independent record seller to buy some actual physical media. If you're looking for official merchandise, go to store.tompetty.com. And if you're looking for merch for this show, please go to store.tompettyproject.com. Don't forget to check out the Tom Petty Nation and Tom Petty Fans Forever groups on Facebook. And make sure you check out Tom Petty Radio on Channel 31 on Sirius XM. Until we meet again next week, keep listening to and sharing Tom's music. Try to be kind. Try to say I love you to someone at least once a day. Stay safe and healthy, and I'll be back with you next week to talk about the third song from Echo, the upbeat Free Girl Now. Bye-bye.